In 2008, I worked at a retail clothing store with my girlfriend Chelsea. We were both 18 years old and we tried to work as many shifts together as possible to maximize our time together because she was still in school. My grandfather had recently purchased a Dodge Sprinter van for his business and my car was being serviced overnight, so I got to drive the van. Chelsea and I loved the nights we got to take the van, because it usually had the back seats installed and the tinted windows meant we could have some privacy, which is great for teens who still live at home. That night, we only had one row of seats in the back, just behind the driver and passenger. Chelsea and I parked near each other like we always did and worked our evening shift, closing the store with a few of our co-workers. We all leave together and I help the manager lock up because the glass doors need to be aligned properly for the lock to engage. It's early March in Pennsylvania and it's still very cold outside, so Chelsea usually starts her car to warm it up and then sits with me as my car warms up. When I get to the vehicles, her car is idling and she's already in the van. I don't even realize that I still have the keys and I never unlocked the doors. She sits with me, chatting for a while. She then sits on my lap and we kiss in the front seats, but we decide it's too late and too cold to have a little fun in the back. Every night we drive home separately from work while talking on the phone. She usually gets home first and I stay on the line while she walks up her long driveway in the dark. That night, I made it home first for some reason, and I knew I had a lot of stuff to carry in, so when I'm close to home, I tell her that I'll call her in a little bit. She asked me to stay on the line because she's almost home and she doesn't like walking past the dark bushes next to her driveway. I stay on the phone and fumble with all of my things I'm carrying out of the van. I know I locked and armed the van because as I was using the key fob to lock the vehicle, I dropped a few things while struggling to keep the phone to my ear. The motion lights have illuminated the whole area, so I'm able to see everything that I dropped. We both make it inside safely and we also decide not to stay on the phone because she had school in the morning. I begin to doze off almost immediately in my bedroom. I lived with my grandparents who built a house to accommodate for my grandfather's aging parents suffering from Alzheimer's, my great-grandparents, so that they didn't have to go into a home. The driveway runs parallel to a daylight basement that has two garage doors, an entrance door, and the French doors to my bedroom. I'm falling asleep as all of the motion lights finally turn off and now my room is completely dark. It wasn't even 20 minutes later when I'm jarred awake by the alarm sirens of the van. All of the motion lights are on and the flashing lights of the van's alarm are filling my room. I left the key fob upstairs in the main part of the house, so I run upstairs to silence the alarm. In the kitchen, as I'm grabbing the fob, my grandfather in his boxers, my great-grandmother in her nightgown, and I in my boxer briefs all meet in the dark. My grandfather grunts as he sees me grabbing the fob, but what my granny said sent shivers down my spine. She basically asked why the hell I was running around outside at this time of night. I wasn't outside. I explained that I was sleeping and she insisted that I was outside making the van alarm. My great-grandparents' bedroom sits above the garage doors looking down over the driveway and the van. I'm assuming she's confused, she has Alzheimer's after all. The goosebumps from her exclamation prompted me to grab a knife from the butcher block anyway, and my grandfather followed with a baseball bat. We both walk outside warily, in our boxers, in the cold but highly illuminated and loud dead of night. The van is still going crazy. The interior lights are all flashing, and I remember that specifically because I'd never seen a car alarm do that. We silence the alarm and start looking around. My grandfather says he thinks a deer may have run out of the woods in the dark and hit the van. I don't say anything as we investigate. When I reach the back of the van, I notice the door is wide open. That explains the alarm. The van has a feature that if the vehicle alarm is armed and a door is open somehow from inside or outside, it alarms. But how? I locked it and armed it, hence the blaring alarm. That's when I realized the door was opened from the inside. My blood ran cold. The door is open so the inside lights are still on. I see the empty space behind the row of seats and there are wadded up napkins and a chip bag. They weren't ours. Someone was in the van with me the entire time. I must have left the van unlocked by mistake when I went into work, and that's how Chelsea was able to get into the van without the keys at the end of the night. Was it a homeless person escaping the cold, or someone with a more sinister intent? What if I had gotten off the phone like I wanted to? If they had bad intentions, the fact that I was on the phone might have saved my life, because Chelsea would have raised hell if she heard me being attacked. I get chills every time I think about it. We didn't call the police because my grandfather was skeptical of my conclusion, but my gut tells me that I didn't drive home alone that night. When I was 11, my family of 6 decided to make the move from suburbia to a lovely rural bungalow. I have 3 sisters, aged 9, 12, and 18 at the time. We were all excited for the privacy and isolation of our new home. For once in our lives, we would have no neighbors and a large yard to play in. Our home had large picture windows giving us a beautiful view of the farmland around us. My parents dislike curtains because there were no neighbors and they collect dust, so we all figured, what's the point? The summer was so much fun there. Every morning I would get up and take my dog for a walk around the woods in our backyard. I absolutely adored the feeling of being alone and was enjoying the freedom of all of our new space. Fall eventually rolled around and I continued my routine of walking my dog both in the morning and after school. I remember one morning while walking my dog, I began to feel uncomfortable. I was alone in the woods, there was no one around, but I still felt as though I was being watched. I had shivers down my back the entire walk, and for an 11-year-old, I just felt really strange. My dog was acting weird too. I kept trying to go farther into the woods, but she kept trying to pull me towards our shed. The shed rested at the very back of our yard, on the edge of the woods, where the trees thin out quite a bit. I didn't like how I was feeling, so I took my dog and brought her back to the house and went on with my day. Days went by and I just couldn't seem to shake this feeling of being watched, especially when I was in my bedroom, which had a huge window in it that overlooked our backyard. The view of the woods that I had previously loved was beginning to scare me. I assumed it was just because it was fall and the forest started looking kind of gloomy, I guess. I started having nightmares about waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the figure of a man in our backyard. Weird things kept happening around our house. We all suddenly noticed that we were eating things like bread a lot quicker. Every morning, half a loaf of bread would be gone, and my parents attributed this to their hungry, growing children. One evening, I woke up and heard noises coming from our family kitchen, which was just down the hall from my bedroom. It sounded like someone had come home and I assumed it was my oldest sister. The only thing that was strange was her footsteps sounded a lot heavier than they usually do. The noise stopped very quickly and I was able to fall back asleep. In the morning, my mom asked me and my 2 sisters, the 9-year-old and the 12-year-old ones, if we woke up last night to make food. We all said no, and then I asked her. I stayed in my bed and felt paralyzed. I rolled over and faced the window, hoping that if someone came in my room, they'd think I was asleep. The noises stopped and I closed my eyes as hard as I could. I told myself I was just imagining things and that monsters aren't real. About an hour must have gone by and I eventually opened my eyes. When I looked out the window, I swear to God, I could see a man standing in our backyard watching our house. Here's a photo that contains a cheesy edit of where I saw him. I was terrified enough that I didn't move at all and eventually fell asleep again. I was so relieved to wake up alive that morning, but was still terrified of our backyard. I ran into the kitchen to tell my mom what I saw and refused to walk the dog. I'm not sure if she really believed me at the time or thought I was having night terror hallucinations, which I did have quite often when I was younger. I went to school that morning. I was anxious all day. The last thing I wanted to do was go home. When I did get home, I saw police vehicles surrounding the house. They had the dogs with them and were searching our yard. They told us a man who had broken into another home had beaten the couple living there and was suspected of being on our property. He stole their wallets, photos, and other small items of value. The biggest thing he stole was their car, which had been ditched 10 kilometers from our home. While searching our property, they found all the items from his previous break-in hidden around our yard. They also discovered that he had been hiding in our shed since his previous break-in. They said he had done this at the previous home prior to breaking in. He would spend time watching the house and observing the residents' routine until he knew it well enough to start coming inside the house. They said he had a long history of premeditated violence, including child abuse, and they believed he was planning on eventually harming us. In the shed, they found wrappers, empty cans of food, and scraps. They told us he was definitely coming into our house for food at night. From the shed, he had a perfect view of our home and could see when we all went to bed. Although they searched our house and property with the dogs, they didn't find him. After that day, I realized that if you feel like you're being watched, you probably are. The writer of this story's first language isn't English, so cut them some slack on the word choice. One night, I stayed at my campus until late at night. It was about 1 a.m. in the morning that I decided to go home. On the front gate of my campus, there was no public transport left, so I had to take the one that's farther away and I needed to walk for 10 minutes before I got there. The path which I had to take has no street lights, so it was dark. In the middle of my path, there was a woman who I knew about. She lived near my boarding house. I've seen her around the area a couple times. It seemed like we were going the same way. I didn't really think much about it at first, but then she looked over her shoulder and she walked a bit faster. The next thing I know, I was left alone there. After I finally arrived at the main street, there was a bus parked at the side of the street waiting for people to board it. As soon as I got onto the bus, I noticed that the same woman as before was on the bus too. She looked terrified when she saw me, and then she changed seats, moving further away from me. I then realized that she probably thought I was a stalker. It was funny for me until I realized that I would get off the bus at the same time as her, and she might really think that I was stalking her then. I was confused. After all, what could I do? Should I try to talk to her and say, hey, I might be big and scary, but I'm just a normal college boy who lives in the boarding house near your house? But that would be awkward, so I decided not to. Finally, I get off the bus, and yes, she got off there too, of fucking course. My boarding house is located in a private housing complex. To get there, I need to walk in a small alley first. That night, the alley was very dark, and that woman was running in a hurry towards the alley because she thought I was after her. I walked slowly, thinking that if she didn't see me right behind her, she might feel safe and let all of this go. I was very wrong, because just when I was about to go in the housing complex, there she was, looking terrified and started screaming at me. I really didn't know what to do, so I just approached her and told her to calm down. I was right about to explain everything when she took out a kitchen knife from her bag. The situation intensifies quickly. I jumped back and told her that I am not a stalker. She didn't believe me and came at me with a knife. I was about to run when a boy who lives in the same boarding house as me passed us. He obviously knew something wasn't right, so he approached us. He told the woman, who was confused as fuck, that I live in the boarding house. I then apologized to her, but she was still upset and left, still looking at us with her judging eyes when she walked out. I made sure she was already far from me when I finally thanked the guy who saved me and told him everything. He laughed at me, but I couldn't laugh. I just had a knife swung at me and it scared me. So yeah, the woman who lives near me, I'm not a stalker and I have no intention to stalk you whatsoever. So please don't think about me as a bad guy who followed you home the other night. I'm a college-age male in my first semester of freshman year at a state university. Less than half an hour ago, I was coming back from breakfast when another student who I've never met before started following me. He was maybe 25, 30 feet behind me, far enough away as to not be in my general vicinity, so I thought nothing of it. I get to the entrance doors of my dorm and swipe my keycard. The dorms are protected by a scanner, allowing me to access the building. As a quick disclaimer, my back has been bothering me the last week or so. I could barely get the door open for me to get through without a spike of pain shooting up my spine. The only reason I was up and at him today was because a midterm was due. I would have held the door open for the guy, but it hurt to even hold it open. And he was quite a ways away and was unlikely to speed up, so I didn't want to be in pain for that long. Dick move, I know, and evidently he thought so too, because as I let it shut behind me, I could see in the window to my right his reflection, his head lurching forward and eyes widening in a, "Really? You really just did that? You asshole," kind of look. I sighed and got ready to apologize as he came in behind me, still moving down the hall because I needed to get back to my room to pack for class. He came in and didn't say a word, at which I thought, fair enough, but I did notice that he was picking up his pace. The way the entry hallway of our building is set up, there's the entry doors at either side which feed into the lobby, where there's doors on the left to the RA's office, the right to the dorm lounge, and the stairs straight ahead. I head toward the stairs straight ahead, expecting to hear the door to the lounge being perhaps somewhat angrily jerked open. But nope, these faster footsteps are coming with me up the stairs. I was at the landing halfway up the stairs, as I live on the second floor, when he got to the stairs. I saw that he was skipping 2 or 3 stairs at a time, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw he was looking at me. Glaring, even. I decided to pick up my pace a little. As I got to the top of the stairs and made a left to get to the door to my hall, he, almost at the top of the stairs, said in a rather confrontational tone, "Hey, pal, wanna talk for a minute?" Between the embarrassment, the aggression to his movements and anger in his voice, added on to the pain in my back, slowing me down to more of a speed limp than anything, I quickly muttered a "sorry" and made sure to get on the other side of the door as fast as possible. He wasn't taking it though, and when I began to speed walk down my hall back to my room, I heard that door slam open behind me. It was one of those ones that had the press bar to open, and I could tell he'd angrily shoved it. I basically went to a full run and heard him shout, "Hey bro, come back, I just want to teach you some manners." Thank fuck I'd had that head start on him, because I managed to get to my room, unlock the door, get in, and slam it just as he got to it. I relocked the door and held my weight against it just to be safe as he pounded on it with his fists and yelled, Come on, man, I just want to teach you some manners, you fat fucking prick. I thought we were bros, man. What, you just gonna fucking hide in there? Our hallway was used to people being rowdy, obnoxious, and loud at all hours because I guess that's who they let into honors nowadays. Not to mention most of them were at class anyway, so nobody came into the hall to call this guy on his bullshit. I threatened to call the campus PD or the RAs to haul this guy away, and I think he got the message because I can't hear him out there anymore, nor can I see him through the peephole. What concerns me is that he lives in our dorm, because our security keycards only work on the buildings we live in, and he knows where my room is. I'm really hoping I never meet him again. This story is told from a female's perspective. My New Year resolution 2012 was to get into shape again. After my first kid was born, I had lost my athletic interest, but I had every intention of getting it back. So I started running 4 days a week with my friend Hannah, who is a great runner and motivator. We would run after work 5, maybe 10 kilometers, usually favoring the forest trail. It's the kind of trail that has lighting in the darker months of the year, so you can run there anytime, really. Once you turn on the lights, you have 45 minutes to run the shorter trails and longer to run the longer trails. Then the lights shut off automatically. We had been running for about 2 months when we started seeing the same man hanging around the parking lot every time we got there. Thin man, 25, 30 years of age, always dressed in sports clothes but never actually running. He never looked you in the eye either. We speculated that he could be homeless camping nearby because he was constantly there. We got used to seeing him, sitting somewhere close by, silently and always on his own. We felt sorry for him. He never seemed to talk to anyone or interact at all. But there was something about him that made us hesitate to talk to him or ask if he was okay. I can't pinpoint what it was, but something wasn't completely right about him. One evening, Hannah didn't make it to our run and I decided to go on my own. I arrived at the parking lot, my car being the only car there. I did some stretching, turned on the lights, and set off on the 5-kilometer trail. I hadn't seen the thin, silent man when I started my run. Perhaps it was getting too cold to sit there now that it was autumn, dark, and getting closer to the freezing point. He must have been there though, somewhere in the shadows, because when I got to the top of the first steep hill, I could hear heavy breathing somewhere behind me. I look over my shoulder and I see him. He's running like a man obsessed, in regular shoes, not running shoes, with his arms moving in a really strange, stiff manner as if he was made of metal, his hands like arrows straight in an upward angle. Sort of like a sprinter, but more extreme, moving like a robot. For the first time, he looked me straight in the eyes, and it was the eyes of a predatory animal, and it made my heart freeze. He had never done anything to harm me, or anyone else as far as I knew, but the look in his eyes alone was enough to let me know that I was facing a serious threat. I started running faster, trying to create distance between us, and I could hear his heavy breathing getting more and more strained. I ran like my life depended on it, adrenaline pumping through my body and giving me new strength. I tore off my necklace and threw it on the ground, thinking, I must leave a trace if he takes me. Something must be left behind. I tried screaming, hoping that someone would be close enough to hear me, but I couldn't scream my lungs out and keep up the pace at the same time. Why is he doing this? What does he want? Who is he? I thought as I started to feel my lungs burn. Then I thought of my 15-month-old daughter and ran until I could taste blood in my mouth. He was still behind me, maybe 100 meters behind me now, but I figured that if I trip and fall, or run out of energy, or fumble with the car keys once I reached the parking lot, then I'm screwed. So once I reached the sharp turn on the trail, I went off the trail and ran straight into the dark woods. I ran only a short distance and then I laid down flat on my stomach, my hands searching for a rock to defend myself with if he found me. I realized that I was wearing bright running clothes with reflectors and neon coloring. I had never felt so visible in the dark before. I could hear him reach the turn and, thank God, he kept on running. I started to slowly, and as silently as possible, move further into the darkness. My heart sank again as soon as I heard rapid footsteps closing in from the trail. He had realized that I must have gone off the trail once he saw that there was no sign of me ahead. He stopped, and I stopped. I could imagine him listening for any sound, and I held my breath and begged a God I don't believe in to make him go away. After a while, I heard him say something in a language I didn't recognize and he walked off. I didn't move. I feared that he would wait for me by the car and realized that I had to get off the trail and onto the main road and stop someone. I couldn't go back to the parking lot. I started to make my way further into the woods, knowing that I would eventually end up on the last part of the long trail and close to the main road. The lights on the trail suddenly shut off. That made me calmer at first. The dark was a comfort and protection. But then, after only a few moments, it switched on again. This could mean that another person had just started their run, and soon I would have someone there to help me. Or that he was out looking for me, or getting ready to prey on another lonely runner. I decided against waiting to find out, and continued my way towards the main road. It was dark and I fell multiple times, my clothes getting wet from the damp vegetation, and I started to get cold. After what felt like a lifetime, I could see the 10-kilometer trail ahead and I knew I was close to the main road. Soon I could hear the traffic. Once I made it to the road, I must have looked like I was in a terrible accident. Blood from several cuts from the falling, my clothes dirty, and my face, I assume, petrified. My bright runner's shirt soon attracted the attention of a passing car. My waving and desperate shouting made it stop. The driver, a 40-ish man with his 2 kids in the backseat, spent the next 10 minutes or so trying to make sense of what I tried to say between the sobbing and crying. He asked if I wanted a ride back to the parking lot, and I told him no, please just take me home instead. At home, my husband insisted on going to the parking lot to retrieve the car, and calling the police. And report what? I asked. No crime had been committed, I just knew he was out to get me. My husband went back for the car. The driver's seat window was smashed and my phone was gone. So was the photo of my daughter that I had hanging from the mirror. I don't know what he was trying to do or why he chased me the way he did, but the look in his eyes, there was no doubt he had bad intentions. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. I wanted to put something out that was a bit longer for you guys. I am an 18-year-old female working the 4 p.m. to midnight shift at a nice, clean gas station convenience store in Canada. Because the location of my workplace is right beside a highway, it is common for people to settle in the parking lot for a while or even stay the entire night. What isn't common is when someone parks beside the cash register parallel to the building. It's about 11 p.m. and I'm preparing to close my shift, excited to go home and rest. Keep in mind, I am only 18 and I still live with my parents. A rush of customers comes and goes when I noticed a car parked outside. Right beside the cash register, there is a huge window in order for the workers to look out to see the customers at the pumps. Many people have parked there before, but none have ever parked parallel to the store, snuggled up to the curb like that. Whatever, I thought. Maybe the man or woman is just exhausted. 11:30 rolls around and the car is still parked there. I had to go inside to shut the oil shack, which happened to be right next to where the car was parked. As I close the shack, I look into the car to see the driver's seat reclined all the way back with a man laying back with a smirk on his face. I rushed inside and got behind the counter right as one of my regulars walked in. I pointed out the man in the car, joking that he's waiting for me. The regular seemed worried, telling me to call the cops. He said to stay safe and then left because he had to go to work. I decided against calling the cops because the guy could have easily just been resting after a long day. At around 11:45, I decided to call my sister because the guy was still outside. We live about 15 minutes from my workplace, a perfect amount of time for her to get there in time for closing. I told her the lowdown, which she responded that she was leaving at that moment and that she would be there soon. 11:48, the guy gets out of the car. Well, shit, I'm closing in less than 10 minutes and now he decides he wants a snack? As I watch him, I notice he is walking around near the pumps, staring off into the sky, later to assume he was looking for cameras. 11:50 and he walks into the store, not returning my greeting. He walks right towards the bathrooms. A couple of customers walk in, and because I was busy with them, I assumed the man may have walked out without me knowing. 12:01 and my sister shows up. Thank God. But the car was still parked outside. She comes in and asks what's up, and I ask if he's in the car. She replies no. That's when my heartbeat increased. I looked at the bathroom doors, where both signs, when vacant, the little sign will be green. When occupied and locked, the sign will be red. They were green. When the bathroom lights are on, you can see the glow from underneath the doorway. The lack of the glow made me assume there was no one in either of them because the lights are all motion censored. I told my sister that there was no one in the bathroom, so I began locking the doors and shutting off the lights. My sister, with her balls of steel, opened the women's bathroom, and guess who's sitting on the toilet? She closed the door and begins yelling at him that the store was closing. A couple minutes pass and he's still in there, so she pounds on the door a little bit more. It's about 12:08 now, and the creep comes out of the bathroom, grabs a cookie, buys it, and walks out. He never even looked me in the eye or spoke. He got into his car right away and hurried off. I finished locking up and met my sister at a Tim Hortons nearby. Had my sister not been there, I'm unsure what could have been the outcome. I could have easily not been typing this right now. Thankfully, that day, at the beginning of my shift, I put in my 2 weeks' notice. I had to work the next night, which was uneventful, yet I was still scared to even go outside. After telling my parents, and my mom being a Criminal Minds fan, she thought that the man may have scanned the property for cameras, and went into the bathroom to wait for me to check them during the closing process of the store. He may have parked parallel for a quick getaway. I'm so glad I'm done working there. Go ahead and give me a hard time if you want, but I'm a Mormon. As many know, we have missionaries, men and women, that go door to door in pairs sharing a message. They are sent all over the world. The missionaries assigned to my city are girls. The two in this story were both very pretty, young, maybe 19, 20 years old, and really innocent. Often when they went to teach someone, they would ask my brother or myself to accompany them, just in case. They would usually invite us when they felt uneasy about a person, or if it was a single man, as a safety measure. This day was no different than the others. They asked me and my brother if we would go with them to visit a man named Chuck. They said they had met him at a local park and that he seemed nice enough, but just a little off. We, of course, obliged. They gave us the time and address and asked if we would meet them there. When we got to the address, the girls were waiting for us outside. We walked up the steep driveway to the house. As we approached the door, written in permanent marker on the door itself, was a message. It said something along the lines of, "This is Chuck's house. Please knock. If I don't answer, call this number." We all laughed. Who the hell does that? We knocked and he opened the door. He seemed very out of breath and was breathing heavily. He very enthusiastically invited the girls in. We were about 4 feet behind them, then he noticed us. His tone changed immediately. He said, I thought you two would be coming alone." They answered with a typical, "They come with us from time to time. They're our friends," type of answer. He gave us an up and down look and said, "Come on in." It was weird, to say the least. The minute we walk into this dude's house, I felt really weird. This guy's house was immaculate, but the strange thing was, there was no furniture at all. Totally empty. He had 2 bar stools set aside and that was it. And on every wall in the house was shelving with plants on them. All types of plants and literally hundreds. Lettuce, spinach, herbs, etc. They were all labeled on the wall in permanent marker. This guy wrote on his walls in marker too? Weird. The girls sat on the bar stools and he sat on the floor. My brother and I stood, and they began their message. About 5 minutes in, he interrupted them. "Oh, I forgot I made you girls some drinks. Are you thirsty?" They kindly said no, but he insisted. He went to the fridge and got 2 already prepared drinks out. They had this dirty, brown-colored liquid in them. It looked like muddy water. He said that he had made them for them earlier in the day. He didn't have one for him, or for us, just the 2 girls. He handed them the glasses and then just stood there and stared, waiting for them to drink. I immediately felt like this was a bad idea, and I could see that my brother and the girls were equally uncomfortable. They made awkward conversation, and I signaled to them that we should go. They cut themselves short, and we left. He was, well, visibly upset, and kept telling us to come back whenever we wanted. When we got to the driveway, we got in our cars and I told the girls to come over to my house. At my house, I told them that they probably shouldn't go back, and they agreed. I knew Chuck's last name. It was on his freaking door in Sharpie, for heaven's sake, and I did some quick Googling. Homeboy was released from a police department in California for general reasoning, and was admitted to a psych ward for over a year. They didn't say why, but there was a whole newspaper written up on it. I don't know what his intentions were, but there were way too many weird pieces for me to want to see him again. This story took place in the summer of 2013. My mom and I was 16 at the time, were on a 6-week road trip across the country. During the 4th week of our trip, we found ourselves in New York. At this point in the trip, we were both exhausted from being on the road for so long and from spending far too much time alone together. But we made it all the way across the country, so we weren't giving up on our adventure. One night, we had tickets to the Yankees game. We went, we enjoyed the game, and had a good time. The game was over at around 10 or 10:30. We were staying in New Jersey, so in order to get back to the hotel, we had to take the subway, then walk some distance to Penn Station to take the train back to New Jersey. So we leave the stadium and get to the subway station, along with the thousands of other baseball fans, and luckily we're able to find the right subway and the exit we need to get off without a hitch. We got off the subway and left the subway station and started our walk to the train station. At this point, it was probably close to 11 and there weren't many people walking the streets. Being from the LA area, I'm not new to the big city, but New York City was a new, foreign, exciting place to me. I was walking pretty slow, trying to take in all the sights. I was looking around and I realized we were right across the street from the Empire State Building. I was stoked and I pointed it out to my mom. She, however, did not share my excitement. With a look of sheer terror on her face, she says something through gritted teeth. "Walk faster and hurry up." I was completely oblivious as to what was going on, but because of how scared she looked, I hurried up without question. She then leaned into me and said, "A guy behind you is about to grab your bag. If he does, let him have it and run." I was stupidly wearing a drawstring Angels backpack, which had been a free giveaway at a baseball game. I know that was a dead giveaway that I was a tourist. Right as my mom said that, I quickly glanced behind me. This huge man was only a few feet back from me and was intently looking me over. He had to have been giant, as I'm 5'8" and he towered over me. I started walking so fast I was almost at a jogging pace. My mom then turned around and looked him square in the eye and she began walking as fast as me. We were approaching a large intersection, so we started looking around to see if we could yell for help if the guy started to grab me. Much to my relief, there was a cop car parked near the corner. The guy must have seen this too, and he turned the other way at the intersection. When we finally got to the train station, my mom told me she had noticed this man had followed us all the way from the subway station. I got extremely lucky that night with the cop being there, and it served as a good lesson to me. I always pay more attention to my surroundings now. So, I'm a pretty big dude. I'm 5'11" and weigh 245 pounds. I'm rather socially awkward and somewhat careless in most situations. Anyways, on to the story. I was walking along a road with several shops and a patrol station. It's usually busy, but it was 8 p.m. I was listening to music, as I normally do, just on my way to my aunt's house, who lives probably 3 miles away. I had to walk because I'm lazy and can't be bothered to get my driver's license. I look over to my right and I see 4 teenagers. 2 or 3 guys and 1 girl. And I think nothing of it until I cross the street to gain access to a shortcut I feel confident about taking. As I said earlier, I'm socially awkward, so as I pass the alley where they were, I stare at my phone and pretend to be doing something. And that's when a cute girl steps out and says something, but I have my music on so I can't hear her. I take my headphones off and excuse myself, and she says, excuse me, I dropped my bag. Can you get it for me? You look strong enough. It's fallen behind the dumpster. The first thing I thought was, damn, she's cute. But then it occurred to me, A, where have the other people gone? And B, how do you drop a bag behind a dumpster by accident? So I refuse and make up a piss-poor apology that my back has been thrown out and I couldn't help her. And that's when I half smile and apologize again and start walking swiftly. Now, here's where cute gets creepy. Even over my headphones, I hear her just wailing, "Please, oh please, I'll insert active sexual favors here. Please just get my bag." She then proceeds to walk after me. Again, not bothered by much, but she just went from 0 to 100 quicker than quick, and I fear she might have a mental illness. So I start jogging faster than I ever have before, and I keep looking back. The worst part, she was still walking. Come to the end, I ran 3 miles and never want to walk down by that alley again. I'm very close to my cousin and she comes to visit me and my grandma sometimes, and we just sit around and talk about what's been going on. This one story scared the shit out of me. At the time, she was working at a retirement community, and that often involved her staying late at night in order to help put the residents to bed and bathe them and such. On this particular night, she decided to get gas and a snack since she had a pretty uneventful ride through lots of abandoned streets that were surrounded by farms and land that was for sale. While she was driving, she noticed a truck turn and begin driving behind her. She thought nothing of it and continued on her way to the gas station as she noticed the truck tailgating her on the empty road. She sped up, and so did the truck. She felt relief as she turned into the gas station parking lot. So did he. She pulled up to the pump and watched. He didn't. He pulled up right behind her, boxing her in with the parked car in front of her. He wasn't anywhere near a pump. She said she knew for sure something was up at that point. So she got out and practically sprinted into the gas station. She grabbed a soda and started looking at the chips, pretending to be indecisive. She snuck a glance outside and noticed a man get out of the truck and come into the store as well. He approached her and said, hey, there's something wrong with your car. Although she was driving a 2008 Honda, she knew very well that there was nothing wrong with it. She decided to prod him to see if he was tricking her. Oh, what's wrong? What? Something's wrong here. If you come outside with me, I'll show you, and I'll even fix it for you. I've got tools in my truck. She felt progressively more uncomfortable, and she nodded, trying to act like she wasn't panicked, looking at the cashier who wasn't paying attention. Oh, you mean the gas cap? She made up something on her feet. Yeah, I know, it's been bothering me. He smiled and nodded excitedly. Oh, yeah, the gas cap. I have the tools you need to fix it. I can help you out. Her heart was racing. Okay, you go get the stuff you need, and I'll meet you out there when I'm done paying for my stuff. He nodded and smiled again as he went back outside and began shuffling around in the passenger side of his truck. She went up to the gas station attendant and said, I need you to call the police. Her cell phone was dead and she took the gas station phone, calling the police immediately. She detailed everything and watched as the man looked back at her. She said he went pale in the face and got into his truck and hauled ass out of the parking lot. She was terrified that he would be waiting for her up ahead, so they sent a police officer to escort her home. To this day, she can't go to that gas station without anticipating she'll see his truck. My cousin asked me to babysit her children while her husband and her were at work. I didn't mind since I was off and I love spending time with them. I live across the street from a neighborhood park, and if you live in the city, you know the park is extremely populated due to the summer camps they offer. Well, as soon as I walked out the door from my house, my niece noticed my friend, Sophie, was parking her car. She usually comes over on my days off since we hardly hang out because we both have busy schedules. I told her I was headed to the park since the weather was nice and the kids can play outside, so she tagged along. We didn't realize how hot it was until we were there for about an hour, so I thought it was time for us to go. We were making our way to the water fountain when I looked up and noticed a man holding his camera. He looked about 60 years old and like your typical tourist. He had a sun hat, map tucked into his pocket, backpack, and camera case. The guy was busy taking pictures of a couple kids from the summer camp program. I know from working in events and photography that if you're trying to take pictures of children, you have to have the consent of their guardian because you don't want to look like a creeper. The camp counselors noticed the guy as well and were talking amongst themselves to see who was going to go talk to the guy. None of them did. Since the guy figured out that he was being watched, he gathered his things quickly and tried to walk away. I knew it was wrong and I told my friend to watch my niece and nephew. I walked up to the guy and I informed him that he wasn't supposed to take pictures of children without their parents' consent. He said he wasn't taking pictures of anyone but of the scenery. I called out his bullshit and asked him to show me the pictures. He became extremely nervous and said no. He left me no choice but to call the police. As I've said before, due to it being summer, the parks were populated. There's a lot of foot and car patrols. It only took less than a minute for the nearest officer to come. I told him the situation and he asked the guy to delete the pictures. The guy started to argue with the officer, but he couldn't win since the camp counselors didn't give consent. The guy finally, willingly, gave the officer his camera and reviewed the pictures. This guy was taking pictures of the kids, but he zoomed into their private areas and faces. The officer kept going through the pictures and discovered older pictures of children like this, but close up. He was arrested and they took my statement and the counselors. It made me sick to my stomach to know that happened while I was there with my 6-year-old niece and 1-year-old nephew. I hope he gets what he deserves. Working alone is scary. Working alone as an 18-year-old girl at a full-service gas station in a scummy part of my town on the night shift by myself is even worse. Let me tell you a little about this station first off. It was one of the first gas stations opened up for a local company, and they were keeping it open for nostalgia's sake. This means that it was all much older equipment, like no credit card slots at the gas pump, ancient cash register, no cameras, etc. And we were to work in this little glass box of a store of which we sold no product in. This was solely a place where my job was to go outside and pump people's gas. And for the year that I worked there, since it was an inconvenient location, I only got about 10 customers per night. I was kinda paid to sit and do my homework or read. This one night in particular was going fine. It was nearly the end of my shift and I was reading an exciting part of my book. Then, I look up from my reading to see a man stumbling towards the glass door. The sight of him makes my heart stop and I silently thank my dad for his suggestion to keep the door locked at night. This obviously drunk man reaches the storefront and automatically pulls at the door to walk in as he approaches. He grabs at it a few more times when he finds that he cannot open it. I, at this point, stand up and go over to the door, and keeping it friendly, I ask, "Hello, is there anything I can help you with?" Talking with the door closed, of course. The man replies in a slurred voice, "I need help. I've lost my wife. She was just with me a moment ago. I don't know where she's gone." And he covers his face with his hands and makes the most fake attempt at sobbing I have ever seen. Then makes eerie, tearless eye contact with me when I start speaking. "I'm sorry, would you like me to call the police for you?" No, I don't know where my wife is." And then he does the whole covering his face, fake crying thing again. "All I want is some comforting. Can I sit down with you for a while? I just need to talk." He gives me an intense look and smiles. "I'll call the police for you if you need. I'm sorry, I really can't help you." Alright, at this point I'm scared shitless. I'm keeping my tone controlled and hoping with every fiber of my being that he will just go away and not try to break in. I have a knife in my pocket and I'm wondering to myself if I would actually have the nerve to stab him if it came down to it. The man proceeds to plead to let him into the store. I firmly say no, and after a few minutes he goes off, still muttering about losing his wife, casting glances back at me the whole walk back to the street. I then call my parents and have them come down immediately so to watch out for me as I count the money to cash out. I had a lot of weird stories stem from this job, but this was the time I think I felt most in danger. My story happened about 4 years ago. I was a single mom living alone and my property is out of town a bit. Not in the middle of nowhere, but not close enough to town for walking distance either. I have a couple of neighbors that I see from time to time and everyone in my area knows everyone else, pretty much. This happened when I was up late one night. I was doing some dishes and cleaning up because my son was in bed for the night. I had let my dog outside to roam the property. I have quite a large field to one side of my house that my dog, Goldie, loves to play and run around in, and I was just humming along with the radio and washing dishes. I go outside to call my dog to the house. She roams to the far end of the property, and it's pretty normal for me to have to call her a few times before she bounds up the yard. And I see a small light in the field that I have never seen before. It looked very much like a flashlight. I was a little creeped out, so I stayed in the lights of my property where my neighbor across the street could see me if he looked out, and it made me feel safer. Whether it was justified or not, I don't know. I called Goldie 3 times, shouting loud because I didn't want to walk into the dark to find her. I waited a few minutes, listening for her paws thumping on the ground, and I did. I also heard a faint male voice from the direction of the light calling my dog back into the field. At this point I can see her. She's about halfway between me and the source of the light. I'm getting freaked out, but I also have weapons in my house and a knife on me at all times, and I'm not about to let this fucker hurt my Goldie or myself. I shout at the dog, "Goldie, you get your little butt over here right now." At this point, she realized I was serious and wiggled her little butt over to me, and I rushed into the house with her. I stayed in the house and turned the lights off so that I could see out without people necessarily seeing me inside. I retrieved my handgun from the safe and loaded it and kept it with me as I checked the doors and windows to make sure they were locked, and I looked out the window on the side of the house to see if the light was still there. I didn't see it when I looked out the window. About 10 minutes had passed at this point since I got in the house. So I put on a low light in the kitchen and started doing dishes again, this time with my gun on the counter next to me just in case. About 30 minutes pass and I'm just starting to reach a level of calm when I hear a very loud crash in my garage. Now, in my area, the neighbors look out for me and I look out for them. So at this point, I went into the living room and called the neighbors across the street to ask him if he will look out his front window and see if there's anyone outside near my garage. I tell him that I'm going to hit the lights in the garage and push the button in the laundry room to open the door. He agrees and seems super concerned. So I creep to the laundry room door that leads into the garage and push the button on the inside of the door. The door opening triggers the garage light to come on. My neighbor immediately freaks the hell out. He tells me there is a man in my garage. At this point, I'm just inside from the garage and I have a gun in my hand, so I open the door fast. There is a guy in my garage trying really hard and very stupidly to hide by the side of my car. I slowly start to walk around and have my weapon aimed and ready to fire. As I walk around the car, I say, "I know you're over there, and I have a loaded weapon. You are trespassing on private property. This is my residence, and if you don't leave, I will be forced to shoot you." Like a flash, this guy gets up and sprints out of my garage like a cat with its ass on fire, shouting, "I'm just a friendly neighbor." After that, I closed up the garage and checked to see if anything was missing. It wasn't. I found the toolbox he had accidentally knocked over that caused the crash, and it seemed like his clumsiness got him caught before he could snatch any of my things. I notified the police that there was a man in the area who had broken into my garage. From what I saw, he found a way to wedge the small garage window open and squeeze in, and they came out, asked a few questions, and left. I heard about a guy being picked up for the same type of thing a few days later in a nearby area, but I'm not sure if it was him. This happened around 3.5 years ago. Names have been changed. I was in my second trimester of my pregnancy, and my husband Tom and I were on a 2 a.m. craving trip to Walmart. When we got there, everything seemed normal. My husband walked over to the movie section while I rushed to get my snack, Pringles and chocolate pudding. I'm pregnant, leave me alone. As I was walking down the chip aisle, a man walked up to me. He was in his mid-late 30s, tall, and wore a leather jacket. He looked me up and down with an almost sinister smile and asked how far along I was. I was cranky, hormonal, and slightly creeped out, so I told him it was rude to assume a woman was pregnant because of the size of her stomach. Also, my pregnancy was none of his business. I shouldn't have done that. He seemed annoyed and walked away. I grabbed my things and went to meet up with Tom. The man kept showing up and just stared at me from the end of each aisle. I started to feel really uneasy and whispered about the man to Tom. He brushed it off and said, "I'm sure he's just mad that you called him out." We went to check out and I looked around. The man was in the next lane over with a single pack of gum. We walked outside and loaded everything into the car. I noticed the man stepping into a big red truck about 2 rows down. Tom started the car and we headed home. The truck wasn't far behind. I told Tom I thought he was following us and saw he looked like he was concentrating very hard. Without warning, he made a hard left. The truck followed, hard right. The truck was still behind us. I started to freak out. We kept driving in zigzags with the truck following each time. Finally, my husband pulled into a gas station. The truck pulled in and put his car into park. He started to get out of the car. We waited until he was walking up to my window. He was about 5 feet away when Tom suddenly took off. We went down several roads to make sure we lost the guy and finally went home. I was so thankful to Tom for keeping a clear head and coming up with a good plan to get me away from that creep. He's my hero. I was 12 when this happened. Usually my younger brother, who would have been 10 at that point, and I would walk home from the bus stop after school. Both of our parents worked and we would spend a few hours home alone together before my mother got home from the senior center she was working for. We did fine on our own, and by then I knew how to cook safely, how to keep the house locked up, and the neighbors usually kept an eye out for anyone near the property, etc. Normally, my little brother would be a bit ahead of me and make it to the house first, but this particular day, he had taken the bus to a friend's house. I walked home and into the house and went straight to the bathroom, as was my daily routine after school. After washing my hands, I moved into the kitchen to find a snack. At this point, it hadn't even occurred to me that I didn't have to use the key to open my front door. The house was always locked when I got home. The only excuse I can make for this is that I was a teenager and I was just glad to be out of school. So, completely oblivious, I make myself a sandwich and sit down at the kitchen table to eat. A couple minutes pass, I'm feeling pretty damn good to be home and enjoying my ham and cheese when I hear a noise at the back of the house. It sounds like a couple of footsteps. At this point, I start to freak out a bit and try to remember if the door was locked when I came in or not. I couldn't remember. I begin making my way slowly towards the back of the house where the sound is coming from. I hear it again, A couple of shuffling steps and then silence. There's someone in the back bedroom, which is my room, moving around. I sit completely still for a few seconds, trying not to make any noise to alert the intruder or let them know that a 12-year-old is home alone in the house. I hear the footsteps again. Whoever this person is, they didn't sound like they were in a hurry, so I figured they must not have realized I was there yet. I carefully made my way out into the yard. I ran as soon as my feet were off the porch and got one of the neighbors to come back over with me. He was a friend of the family that lived really close and kept an eye on our place a lot of the time. He tells me to go into his yard and wait there. I have a clear view of my house from his yard, and he tells me to call 911 if he isn't back outside within 5 minutes. I waited in his yard for probably 2 minutes before I started thinking that he must be dead or dying or something, and I was debating on whether or not to call the cops when my neighbor comes out of my front door with some guy I've never seen before. He has this guy's arms behind his back and is holding him. He shouts at me to call the cops, and I do, telling them what happened. They showed up, and they took the guy away. Turns out, he was wanted in another county for breaking into multiple houses while people were away at work, vacation, that sort of thing. I'm just glad it all turned out well. So this happened to my mom 21 years ago when my brother and I were only kids. We used to live pretty far out of town, like a 5-minute drive, which doesn't sound like much, but it was far out enough to not get many visitors unless they were invited. She moved to this little house because she was only after getting a divorce from my dad, and the guy that owned the house she was renting felt sorry for her and gave her a really good price for the rent, so she didn't mind that it was a tiny house in the middle of nowhere. So one night, this guy calls at the house and knocks at the front door, so my mom goes to answer it. In our town, your mind doesn't just instantly jump to the worst case scenario. This young guy, mid-20s, at the door was covered in blood, dirt, and completely out of breath. He asked my mom if he could use the phone and said he hit an animal with his car and he needed a taxi. My mom said, "No, sorry, go somewhere else." At this point, he stuck his foot in the door and said, "Can I use your phone?" I should point out that my uncle, 6'3", fairly big, was out with my mom at the time fixing something in the kitchen. He came to the front door, saw the guy, told him to fuck off, followed after the guy to the road, and watched as he jumped into a nearby field and just started running. He decided to stay the night just in case the guy came back. The next morning, when my mom was about to take my brother and I to school, the police showed up and wouldn't let my mom leave the house. It turns out the guy was arrested after brutally killing a young 11-year-old, just shortly before calling at our house, I assume. It still kinda freaks me out to this day. What would have happened if my uncle hadn't been there that night? I'll leave the link to the news story in the description. I was about 11 years old at the time and I was home alone on a school day. I had begged my father the night before to let me skip school and I was not in the mood to sit through 8 hours of class. So, I faked being sick and my father allowed me to stay home. My aunt was at work so I had the house to myself. So, in all of this together, I got to spend a school day in my 3-story house all by myself at 11 years old. I thought I was the boss. It was around 10:30 in the morning when I was suddenly awoken by a commotion downstairs. Me being a naive, incoherent 11-year-old, I thought, hey, my aunt stopped by during her lunch break. Cool. So I turned back over and for the next 5 minutes I attempted to fall back asleep. But the noise continued. So begrudgingly I yawned and arose from my bed to go downstairs and greet her. But I needed to go to the bathroom first. Rubbing the crust from my eyes, I practically sleptwalked to the bathroom. I did my business, then, as soon as I flushed the toilet, I heard what sounded like someone take off downstairs. Like, it legit sounded like someone ran into the door rushing to get out of there. That woke me up. It was then that I completely turned into a horror movie cliche. I became the exact person who I, upon seeing on television, would curse out and throw popcorn at. I quietly went downstairs to check out what the hell was going on. I think I knew something was wrong, but being the idiot that I was, I still wanted to see what that noise was. So I got to the second floor landing and creeped around the corner to look downstairs and saw the back door wide open. And I froze. Like I actually froze for a solid 25, maybe 30 seconds. And then it started to click. I went from confusion to fear. My heart rate picked up, my breath shortened, my eyes started to well up. Then I took off upstairs into my room, locked myself in, and barricaded myself in by shoving my bed in front of my door. I hid behind the opposite side of the bed and practically had a mini panic attack before searching for my phone and calling my dad. I know, not even 911 first. Jesus Christ, I was fucking stupid. Upon picking up, I quietly asked whether he came over. No. He was at work. Did he know if my cousin's husband stopped by? No, not that he knew of. Why? I told him and he practically blew up. Call the police. I stayed in that spot behind my bed until the cops came. According to them, the thief was only able to grab a laptop and a few other things before, they think, he took off after hearing me upstairs. After that, my dad installed a security system and changed all the locks. Back then, it never really hit me the severity of what had happened. But now, 12 years later, I realize how fucking stupid I was and how I made a shit ton of mistakes that could have cost me. The thing that frightens me the most, though, is the fact that whoever it was probably knew my aunt and I's schedule so well that they were brazen enough to break in the morning. And here's the reason I think this. Our neighborhood is nice, the houses aren't super spread out, and it never screamed, "Hey, rob me, this house is an easy target." I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking. Whatever, although I never actually came in contact with the person, it still scared the shit out of me. And every so often I can't help but look back and wonder, what if I hadn't had to use the bathroom? It has been speculated amongst my family that the robber could have been one of my cousins that has had a few brush-ins with the law, but we never found out. This happened in 2007 when myself and some friends, two 17-year-old females from Ireland, spent 2 weeks in a small town in Italy to take part in a language course. We were studying Italian at school and needed to improve our spoken Italian before the exams. In this small town, there was nothing much to do for two teenage girls, so we looked forward to going to the local bar each night and having a few drinks. The bar we are in, like a lot of places in Europe, free pours the alcohol, so although we have only had around 3 vodka and cokes, in reality it is probably the equivalent of splitting a large bottle of vodka. Basically, we are plastered. We end up, unfortunately, talking to these two Italian guys who seem to be about 23, maybe 24 years old. One of the guys is really quiet, so his friend does all of the talking. After about 15 minutes, it becomes very apparent that the talkative guy is interested in my friend, who at this stage is very worse for wear and practically falling asleep at the table. He becomes increasingly predatory, squishing himself as close as possible to her and was quite forcefully caressing her arms and legs. At this point, I decide that enough is enough and that we have to go home. Of course, they follow us, so I'm trying to hold at my friend and steer her home while this guy is becoming more and more aggressive, After about 10 minutes of walking and me continually telling them to fuck off and leave us alone, things take a bit of a turn for the worse. He aggressively starts to try and pull my friend away from me, and when I hold on, it's like a game of tug-of-war. He starts to get violent, slapping my hands and arms, and at one point narrowly misses my face. At this point, I'm yelling at my friend to sober up and be of some use. Like I said, it was a small Italian town and this was a midweek evening, so no one was about in the streets. We are pretty much on our own. After a few more minutes of struggling, it seems like they finally take the hint and go away. We walk a bit more down the street and my friend is managing to sober up. From where we are, we have to take the next left, and then our apartment is on the next street on the right. We're about to turn left when I see a newspaper stand further up the street. The stand is closed, obviously, and faces the street where our flat is located. It is very dark, but I can just make out a sort of circular shape above the newspaper stand. As I'm looking, the circular shape ducks down and I realize that it was someone's head. The guys are hiding behind the newspaper stand with God knows what intentions. Sheer panic sets in as I'm trying to assess the situation, wondering if these guys are really going to hurt us, and how we would be able to avoid them seeing us go into our apartment from their hiding place. I decide that, instead of turning left immediately, we'll keep walking until the next left, and then take the next left turning onto that street. If you imagine, it is a U-shape, so we have two options for getting home from where we are, with our flat being located right in the middle of the street. We walk a bit further and take the next left. On this street, we cannot see the guys or the newspaper stand. Trying not to cry, I turn to my friend and say, "We are in a very dangerous situation. When we get to our street on the left, they will see us. I don't know what they're going to do, but you have to run to the door. Run as fast as you can. Don't waste your energy thinking about them. Use all of your energy for running." At this point, she starts to cry, having not realized the severity of the situation until now. She hands me the house key from her bag, which I hold tightly in my hand, prepared to open the door quickly. As we reach the corner of our street, we see two shadows at the other end. Both duos simply stand and watch each other from a distance for a brief moment, and then I whisper out of the side of my mouth, "Run." We start sprinting towards our apartment. Bear in mind, it's quite a long street. When the guys see us, they start legging it down the street. My friend starts screaming and I'm yelling at her to move faster. After what seems like forever, we reach the door of the apartment and I'm frantically trying to push the key into the lock. She's screaming, "Hurry up, they're coming, they're going to get us." I finally manage to open the door and we practically fall through, slamming it shut. Literally 2 seconds after we shut the door, the guys arrive and start frantically trying the handle, banging on the transparent door with their fists. Me and my friend are just sitting on the stairs crying, trying to catch our breath. We watch them as they try to bust open the door with their shoulders, screaming curses in Italian. They eventually stop and we walk up the stairs to our flat. About 15 minutes later, I walk quietly down the stairs to check that they're gone. They're both still there, standing with their hands and faces pressed against the glass, just staring.
I was 19 and just started my first year at university in London. In England, there's a traditional Freshers' Week with lots of events and parties for new undergraduates. Another thing about London is that many students don't live in dorms, simply because rent prices are far too high for universities to afford enough housing for all their students. So I lived by myself in a small studio and would have to travel alone to parties and back home again. I was a bit wary about London because it was a big city and far less safe than the small town I grew up in. But I lived in a fairly good area and took all precautions of not walking alone at night. I ended up living in London for 5 years, but ironically, the scariest encounter I ever had was on an underground train full of people in the most touristy part of town. It proved to me that encountering a creepy stranger can literally happen anywhere, anytime. So I was getting ready to attend freshers party at a famous nightclub, Fabric London. I spent ages doing my makeup and was wearing a Rocawear top, which was all the rage in the early 2000s. Most girls know how to make themselves look very attractive with enough effort, so I don't think it's vain to admit that I was a bit self-conscious of attracting attention from the wrong places. I wanted to look good at the party, but didn't want to catch the eye of any strangers on the way to or from the club. Also, my boyfriend at the time, who knew London better than me, actually advised me to get a pepper spray because you could never be too sure. I had the pepper spray in my coat pocket, and I initially felt quite silly carrying it. It was only 8 p.m. when I caught the underground train across central London. The platform was very crowded with tourists and commuters. I was squeezing my way down the platform when I caught a glimpse of a disheveled-looking man standing amongst the crowd. He was maybe 40, very tall with gray, greasy hair and a long, dirty coat. He was muttering to himself and looked like a drunk, homeless person, which wasn't too unusual in a big city. However, I decided I'd rather not be in the same carriage, so I went further down the platform without breaking my stride or making it seem obvious I was avoiding him. In fact, I went by so quickly, I assumed he never even saw me since the platform was very full and he looked dazed and unfocused, mumbling to himself. The train arrived and I got a seat. London Underground trains are extremely narrow, so there are simply 2 long rows of seats facing each other that runs down the entire carriage. I was mildly relieved to have avoided the homeless man and started looking forward to the party. However, to my absolute terror, when the train stopped at the next station, the creepy man rushed out of the carriage he was in and came into mine. He must have noticed me earlier because he was staring at me as he made a beeline for the empty seat next to me. What happened next made my blood freeze. Immediately after sitting down, he leans over until his mouth is inches from my ear and slurred with a foul, alcohol-laden breath, "If you fucking move a muscle, I am going to stab you." He had both hands in his pockets, so I didn't know if he was hiding a knife. It was primal instinct that told me I had to get away from this dangerous madman, so I stood up and rushed down the carriage even though I knew it was against his instructions. At this point, all the other passengers knew something was wrong, but instead of intervening, they all moved to the other end of the train, trying to get as far away from the situation as possible. This is the part where people often get angry, wondering why nobody tried to help me. But thinking back to that moment, I honestly don't blame the other passengers one tiny bit. In their place, I would have done exactly the same thing. As I moved down the carriage, he got up and followed me. I stood by the door praying for the train to reach the next station so I could get out and get help from someone who worked on the platform. I was fully expecting him to attack me any second, and I had my finger on the pepper spray that was in my coat pocket. However, I realized with a sinking feeling that he was so intoxicated, the pepper spray may not even have made a difference. His entire face was a sickly dark red color. His eyes were pale blue, completely unblinking and bloodshot. He leaned over me and started shouting gibberish. I only made out a few words, including "your boyfriend" and the word "fuck" several times. I had no idea who he thought I was or what he was shouting about. Maybe he was suffering from some sort of psychosis or schizophrenic episode. The train finally pulled into the next station, and to my absolute relief, he got off the train. He staggered across the platform talking to himself, still with both hands in his pockets. I never knew if he was holding a knife or whether he ended up attacking someone else. Stabbings happen so regularly in London that it's not even considered real news, so most incidents only get a tiny story on a back page of the newspaper. As soon as the door shut again, all the other people in the train started exclaiming, "Oh my goodness, are you okay?" I was frozen with fear, but surprisingly, relatively okay because of the huge relief of seeing him go away. I went straight to the party and actually enjoyed myself a lot. However, after that experience, I started taking taxis whenever I could afford it.
This next story is told in the perspective of a female. You know, obviously. This is the story of me, my baby daughter, and an older Indian gentleman who became our guardian angel. 6 months ago, I gave birth to a little girl, Clea. Her father and I were over the moon that she had finally arrived, but the process of getting her here was gruesome. I'm a small woman, and she was a surprisingly big baby, almost 10 pounds. A very cute and precious almost 10 pounds baby at that, but it made for a hard delivery to say the least. 7 hours into labor with no signs of progress, meconium, which is signs of fetal distress, showed up and I was whisked into an emergency C-section. We were finally sent home 3 days later with a bill of good health, but my recovery was slow and painful. I ended up having to take a much longer than standard maternity leave. Clea and I, mainly me, slowly made our way to feeling good. And about 2 months ago, I felt up to snuggling her into the baby sling and walking the 4 blocks to our yoga studio for a very simple mommy and me classes every Tuesday. The real treat was afterwards at the Dunkin' Donuts next door, where I would get a smoothie afterwards. Vinod is a 60-year-old man who works behind the counter. He had a bright demeanor that instantly made me happy, always telling me how bright I made his day. He loved seeing my smile, and one day I was going to have to ditch my rotten husband to come back to India with him. This was said in playful context, of course. He wasn't creepy. He adored Clea. She's one of those babies that has rolls all over, and he was always saying how big and healthy she looked. He promised when she got old enough to eat real food, he would give her as many munchkins as she could want. The day Clea turned 5 months was a Tuesday. We headed to yoga and then to visit Vinod, who, as usual, cooed at the baby, and gave me a free smoothie for being such a good mom at only 5 months. We said our goodbyes, and I, in a rare moment of absent-mindedness, decide I'm going to take the alley shortcut across the street to get to the block I need to be on. It was such a bright day, the alley only had a little shadow in it, and it was less than 14 feet long. I didn't even have a concern in my mind. I know. Incredibly, incredibly stupid. I made it past the garbage cans when I felt something cold against my shoulder blade. Turning around, I saw a man with what looked like a stun gun, I have no clue about weapons, pointed in my direction. "Your wallet. Give me that. Give me your rings, your earrings, your phone. Anything of value on you is mine now." I didn't know what to do, so I started sobbing as I shakily reached for my shoulder bag. He pressed the stun gun into the side of my abdomen. "Quiet. I'll use this. I don't care about the baby. I don't care about..." I never found out what he didn't care about, because the corner of my eye suddenly filled with a flash of brown, pink, and orange. It was Vinod, armed with one of those handled trays that the employees use to slide bagels into the oven. He got in one good hit, and the man was off like a shot. I'm shaking and crying. Clea is wailing, and Vinod, well, I was afraid he would keel over. Red, panting, and looking around all wild-eyed, he walked me back to the shop to call the police and my husband. Nothing ever turned up, but Vinod has my undying gratitude and appreciation for saving me in a moment of stupidity that went terribly wrong. Whatever major holiday it is, I don't care if he doesn't celebrate it, he gets a present from me and Clea. He deserves more than that, but I just don't know how to thank him to the degree he deserves. Before this video begins, I'd like to say that this is a true story that happened to a girl named Alyssa. This video is made to scare you, but to also bring awareness to what you post online. That being said, let's begin. It was finals week of my first semester at Kent State University in 2011. Naturally, I was creeping on Twitter and doing everything I could to not study for exams. I clicked on a hashtag in a tweet I had posted earlier that day for no apparent reason and was shocked to see the exact text from my tweet posted from another account. The account had my picture and the name Lauren Ashley Cook. At first I thought my computer was switching names and images, that Twitter had a bug, or that I accidentally duplicated my account somehow. It never crossed my mind that someone had made the account with my image on purpose. I clicked on the profile, which had hundreds of tweets and a significant amount of followers. Looking through the account, I could see that all the tweets were copied from my account. The Twitter bio had a link to a Facebook account under the same name, also using my pictures and information. Things got even weirder when I saw that Lauren and her friends were posting on one another's walls. Her friends were using pictures of my friends. Not only did they talk to each other, but the conversations were identical to posts and comments my friend and I had left each other. I called my friends and told them about what I had found. 5 of us gathered around the computer and looked through all the different photos, statuses, and comments on the pages. Finals were the last thing on our minds at this point. Who would do something like that? And, oh my gosh, how did she know that inside joke? Were some of the questions flying around the room. My friends and I were all beyond creeped out. I decided to Google the name, Lauren Ashley Cook. Lauren Ashley Cook had multiple websites using my pictures, and she had created quite a life for herself. She was very social on Facebook and Twitter, but posted dark and depressing things on Tumblr. Lauren would post pictures of my ex-boyfriends and me and post about how much she hated them. Most of her posts were made-up scenarios or stories revolving around one of my photos. One post that stood out most to me was a blog entry about her deceased brother. Lauren posted a photo of an old friend and me. Underneath the photo, she wrote about how much she missed her older brother and how she would see him again one day. The boy in the photo is not my brother, and he is very much alive. Many of her posts revolved around depression and death. As if this wasn't alarming enough, I came across a blog under Lauren's name that had been active since 2007. I was only 14 when this started. How had I not known someone, somewhere, was taking my information and pictures for 5 years? To my knowledge, my social media accounts were private, and only people I approved can view my information. One name popped up on every website, talking to Lauren and comforting her when she was depressed. His name was Mike, and it was very obvious he and Lauren had feelings for each other. Although nervous about what his reaction would be, I reached out to him under my real name. I wrote him a very long Facebook message explaining that Lauren was not real and that someone was taking my pictures. At first, Mike thought I was impersonating Lauren and wanted me to prove I was real before talking to me. He asked me to take a photo holding a sign up that said, "Hi Mike." Once I did this, he messaged me things like, "I can't believe this," and "She lied to me." I told him I was so sorry that someone had done this to him, but I wanted to find out who was behind this and I needed his help. He started telling me all about Lauren. Lauren and Mike had been talking for a year online. "We say I love you to each other. She sends me pictures of herself all the time," he told me. My heart broke for him when I realized how hurt he was. Mike was in his early 20s and lived in New Jersey. He was in the process of launching his own clothing line and loved creating music. "What's Lauren like?" I asked him. He typed me long paragraphs describing Lauren with great detail. She is a freshman at Kent State, She graduated from Medina High School in 2011, and she worked at a nursing home for the last 2 years of high school. She loves ballet and has a little sister and a lot of dogs. As he rattled off more and more facts about Lauren, I realized just how much Lauren knew about me. I was a freshman at Kent State. I graduated from Medina High School in 2011, and I worked at a nursing home in high school. All the things she had told Mike about herself were actually facts about my life. I asked Mike if he could give me the number that she texted him from, and he did. As I typed the number into my phone, the name Creep popped up, and I instantly remembered who it was. Rewind 6 months earlier, it was June of 2011. My friend and I decided to go grab some late night food when I received a text from an odd number. When I opened it, I was taken back to see it was a nude photo of a man in a mirror. Thinking it was someone playing a joke on me, I asked, "Who is this?" The number replied with, "It's your secret crush, gorgeous Alyssa. What are you doing right now?" I decided it was probably one of my goofy guy friends playing around. I ignored the text and put my phone away. The number kept texting me though. The person said things like, "What are you wearing right now?" and "I'd love to hear the noises you make." I kept ignoring them until I couldn't handle the messages anymore. I responded with only, "Leave me alone. If you don't, I will call the police." The person apologized and didn't send any more texts. I saved the number as Creep in my phone in case something ever came up, and that moment had now arrived. I decided to go to the police with a list of more than 20 websites using my pictures and information. I explained the creepy text that this person had been doing since 2007 and that I was genuinely worried about who this person might be. Why would this person send me a picture of a guy in the summer if he or she was pretending to be a girl named Lauren? Why had this person followed me for 5 years? I got goosebumps when I thought about someone I didn't know looking at my pictures and saving them to their own computer every day for so long. I became even more concerned when the officer said there was absolutely nothing anyone could do to stop this person or find out who he or she was. I was told that when it came down to it, I had allowed someone to access my pictures and it was not illegal for that person to take them. I could only pursue the stalker if he or she used my name or threatened me. It didn't matter that Lauren knew everything about me or how long she had been doing this. I was told to stay off the internet and forget about it. Needless to say, I was beyond disturbed and couldn't just forget about this. The websites were so well thought out and detailed, updated every day with new posts. The stalker had pictures from my MySpace account, which was deactivated years ago. I couldn't figure out who would have access to not only my pictures, but my friends' online accounts as well. My friends and I started going through our Facebook friends, picking out anyone who seemed fake. "I think I found the Facebook," one of my friends texted me. It was a profile named Lisa Jones. This person hadn't updated their Facebook in months, but was friends with more than 300 people from my high school. It didn't take long to figure out how she was gaining access to our information. Lisa Jones added hundreds of friends, including us, and we accepted since we had a ton of mutual friends. None of us even thought twice about it. She just logged in and went under the radar by not updating, only using the Facebook account to get our pictures and information. I broke down and decided to text the number myself. I started off with, "You know exactly who I am and I know what you're doing. Take the websites down." The stalker responded. The mood of the text changed from apologetic to angry. The stalker's identity constantly changed. First, the stalker said she was a 16-year-old girl, only to say later that she was a young mother. I was so confused and angry, but I couldn't help but feel sorry for this person. The stalker admitted that he or she had found me on MySpace years ago, then followed me from MySpace to Facebook to Twitter as I created my own accounts. Lauren also managed the 7 Facebook accounts of my friends, admitting that she would duplicate our conversations on their profiles. "You just have the perfect life," the stalker told me. I couldn't believe this person thought I had the perfect life and had been stalking me for 5 years. According to her, she came across my MySpace at random. "It's easier to talk to people using your pictures. I'm not happy with my life at all," Lauren texted me. Something in me felt sorry for this person, but I tried to stand my ground. She agreed to take the websites down, saying she knew it was a problem. "I know what I'm doing is wrong. I need to start focusing on myself," she told me. I was relieved, but I felt she agreed a little too quickly to mean what she said. She proved me right when she deleted the current websites, created new ones, and sent them to Mike, still pretending to be Lauren. She even told Mike that someone was stalking her after I texted her. She had no idea I had been in contact with him. Every time she created a new site, Mike would let me know. I would text her, she would delete the websites, then she would create new ones. It was a never-ending cycle. I was extremely frustrated and angry, but realized I couldn't stop this person from creating websites. The only thing I could do was stop the stalker from having access to my information from now on. I deleted hundreds of friends on Facebook, blocked people on Twitter, and monitored what I posted. After deleting Facebook friends, I received messages from Facebook accounts made hours earlier saying, "Can you please add me? I heard you're the girl that Lauren was pretending to be." I knew it was Lauren trying to gain access to my information again. This went on for weeks. I couldn't believe she wanted to access my information and pictures that badly. Lauren still creates blogs using my pictures. Most of the websites and Facebook accounts have been deactivated, but I'm unsure of how many websites she has that I haven't found. I try not to let it get under my skin. I've accepted that there is nothing I could do to stop her legally, but I want to be proactive. My goal is not to scare anyone out there of using social media, but to help other girls make positive changes in how they use social networks to better protect themselves. If I had known back in 2007 the huge impact social networking would have on our generation, I would have been more selective about adding friends or posting photos. My hope is other girls can read this story and learn from my mistakes. While the show Catfish is truly entertaining, it's a lot more fun to watch than it is to feel like you're living in an episode.